Please welcome to the show, Mark Moss. He is the market analyst for Market Disruptors. He also has his own nationally syndicated radio show. Mark, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm a fan of the show. I try to watch many of the episodes. And as I was telling you before, I'm a huge fan of Porter Stansberry as well. So
nice.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, thanks for that. It's actually, I want to say thank you to George Gammon, who suggested that I get you on the show. Now, for the folks familiar with your work, you are let's say, a diehard Bitcoin backer, supporter.
Yeah.
You recently spoke at George's conference, Rebel Capitalist, about Bitcoin. And I guess that's going to be my topic for you here today. You've also been tweeting a lot about inflation and these incredibly high inflation numbers. They say 7%, but as we all know, it's definitely much higher than that. And this is Bitcoin's shining moment right here. The debate is, how will Bitcoin react? Will it come out, as the winner, as the knight that defeats the inflation beast? Or there's folks on the other side of the debate who will say, well, look, it just hasn't been tested yet in this environment. Only time will tell. How do you see it?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I'd say, just to frame this up for a second, I'm a big Bitcoin backer, as you said. You asked me if I was a Bitcoin maximalist. I would just say I spent 4 years writing a cryptocurrency research newsletter. So from 2016 to 2019, I personally researched and published over 1,000 pages of research on every crypto project and genre, from decentralized exchanges to privacy coins, et cetera. And after 4 years, I decided that I was just going to focus on Bitcoin. So I do like to say that, because other people are like, you're ignorant. You haven't ever done your research. I've published thousands of pages. But back to the question that you asked, I would say yes. That's the short, easy answer. The bigger answer is that over what time frame, right? And so that's always the question that people lose nuance over, I think. And so if you look back over, Weimar Republic of hyperinflation, you can go, dang, like the German mark, versus the gold trade was probably the best trade of the decade. Like, look, it's like a hockey stick. Look how much you could have made. But when you zoomed in on that, the volatility was insane. And if you were trying to trade that, you would have been shaken out over and over. So I would answer the question, yes, I do believe it will emerge as the best asset class, this inflation hedge. But if you're looking at it on a monthly basis, it might not always look like that.
Okay, so but short term, how do you see Bitcoin's player reaction here? As you know, a lot of folks disappointed with the cryptocurrency start to the new year. Its worst start in history, really.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is, one, again, it depends on what time frame you're looking at. So obviously we know that Bitcoin has been one of the best performing assets in the world, 200% compounded annual growth rates since its inception. And then it depends on what period you want to look at. So year over year, it was up 30%. So it's definitely beat inflation year over year. If you want to look at 18 months or 24 months, now we're talking 300-400%. So that's beat inflation as well. Now, if you want to talk in the last 30 days, obviously the last 30 days has been down. So, we did reach a high of about 69,000. It's pulled back. It's kind of consolidated in this like 40,000 range. But again, if I'm zooming out, what I would look at is that over the last 2 years, it's gone from 3,000 to we're sitting in, in the 40-ish range right now. But I think if you look at it a little bit differently, it scaled all the way up to 65,000, pulled back, and it consolidated in the $30,000 range. That was like in May of 21, after China shut down all the Bitcoin miners. It then continued to, I think that took about 75 days-ish that it sat in that 30,000 range. It then shot up to 69,000. So from 65 to 69,000. And now it's pulled back into the 40,000-ish range, and it's consolidating there. So what I'm looking at is like the progress up. So it consolidated at 30. Now it's consolidating at 40. And so to me, that looks like positive progress. Like I said, year over year, it's done really well. The last 30 days, it hasn't. But again, I just don't think that we should be zoomed in that far. I think one thing about Bitcoin that's very difficult for a lot of people to understand is that it's a lot of things. So we're witnessing a technological revolution, not just a new technology, but a revolution. And so a technological revolution, there's been 5. So we have like the Industrial Revolution, steam engines and steel, electricity, automobiles, and telecommunications, the microprocessor. And each one of those changed the way the world works. And if you look at like electricity, if we were back there during the day, we'd say, what is this electricity? What does it do? Well, it's sort of like this digital candle. Well, what do we need a digital candle for? Candles have been light for 5,000 years. It's been fine. And look, it's portable. Look how much better it is. But electricity changed the way the world worked. And I think with Bitcoin, we're also witnessing this technological revolution. And so it's a lot more than just what we think it is right now. And so when you're looking at a new technology, and this is just a key point, that when you're looking at new technology, you can't really look at the daily price of it. You're really trying to look at two things. One is the growth of the network. Are more users coming on? Is Metcalfe's law kind of playing out? Is the network growing? And then two, is there development happening on the network? Is it growing? And so as long as those two things are going, then I think the short-term price is kind of a distraction, in my opinion. Yeah.
No, and that's really well said. And I just had Max Kaiser on, one of the biggest proponents of Bitcoin out there, who basically saying the same thing, that we just get so focused on the price, and it's much more than the price. I think for the folks who maybe are invested in Bitcoin but aren't as close to Bitcoin as you or Max Kaiser are, it's hard to say don't focus on the price when they've personally put in a lot of their investment money into that asset.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is, again, if you're investing in brand new technology, so, I mean, go back and look at the darling Amazon, for example, right? And so it's had massive volatility over its, the last 2 decades. I mean, it's crashed 80-90% multiple times. But again, if you believe in that Amazon was going to become this world leader in e-commerce, then you kind of have to stay in it. And I like to go to Warren Buffett, who's definitely not a Bitcoin fan. But Warren Buffett has said many good things. One of the things, his partner Charlie Munger said, is that the big money is not made in the buying and the selling; it's made in the waiting. And so Warren Buffett said, if a new investor came into his career and knew he only had 20 trades his entire career, he could outperform everybody. And that's because you'd identify the big trends, you'd get in early, and then you just have to wait for that trend to develop. And I think that's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is the biggest trend that we'll ever see in our lifetime. I believe over the next decade, we'll see most of the world's wealth move over to Bitcoin. And I think if we allow that to develop, we can have massive returns. But when you're trying to get on something so revolutionary, I just don't know if you can manage it on a monthly basis.
Well, let me ask you this, Mark. To that point, you obviously speak very passionately about Bitcoin. You say in the past you wrote about other cryptocurrencies. What was that moment for you that you realized, and what made you realize that you just wanted to focus on Bitcoin? Why Bitcoin? Why not Ethereum? Why not Solana? Why not, whatever, Dogecoin? Pick any other crypto. Sure. What made you just focus on BTC? Why is that the winner for you?
Well, I think you have to step back and understand what is the problem that we're trying to solve. So you mentioned, I just spoke at the George Gammon's conference last weekend. Ron Paul spoke, which was amazing. He's kind of passed the torch on to people like George and I. And I gave a presentation on In the Fed, right? Yeah, that's what Ron Paul started that movement. And I talked about In the Fed, but why? Who is the Fed? And why? What have they done wrong? And so basically it's a story of central banks creating money from thin air. And so you asked about inflation before. I look at inflation as the Austrian view of inflation, which is it's the money supply that inflates. And when the money supply inflates, it starts causing distortions all across the market. It transfers wealth from one group of people to the next. George Washington, our founding father, warned us that the bankers would use inflation and deflation, and the children would end up owning nothing on the continents their forefathers had conquered. And so it's through using inflation and deflation, increasing the money supply and decreasing the money supply, that causes all these distortions. And I broke down in the talk I gave with a bunch of charts to show even societal distortions. So since 1971, when we broke apart from the Federal Reserve, or I should say, sorry, from the gold standard, the obesity rate, the divorce rate, the unwed mother rate, the incarceration rate have just completely skyrocketed from that day. And it's all because of the money. So that's where I identify the problem. And then if we want to solve that, then what we need is a new system that no person can control, not just a different group of people, but no people. We need a system that has a fixed supply cap instead of an unlimited supply cap like the US dollar or like a lot of cryptocurrencies. And then we need something that has a fixed rule of law instead of governance, right? We don't want changing law. That's one of the problems that we have today, is that we used to have a constitution that was a rule of law and I could set my life on it. But today we're ruled by men who are arbitrarily changing the rules all the time on us.